Mr. Peter Burns, hello.
Mr. Block. Yeah, greetings.
Good to see you again.
A long
It's been a
time.
while. Yes, yes. Well, you left Malaysia at the end of 2018?
2018. I've been here for three years, coming up for 4 years.
Wow. Wow. How is it over in the UK?
Well, if you don't subscribe to the news and keep living your own little world, it's actually not too bad. And having spent many years travelling, I quite enjoy being in one place for at the same sort of time. It's good.
Ah, that's good. That's good. And you getting plenty of motorsports while you're over there? Or has it been quite dead?
Yeah. Well, it was busy towards the end of last year for all sorts of reasons that happened out in the desert of Abu Dhabi, but it's starting to filter in again. I think what's more interesting at the moment, they've started the next test in Bahrain, is what the cars are going to look like, because I haven't seen that many shots of them yet. And you look at, they say the new Mercedes hasn't got barge boards and it's slim around the sides, and Williams is meant to be the same. It'd be very interesting to see how they all. It's one of the biggest changes they've had for years. How they all go on the track. They'll probably find it was exactly the same as it was the year before. That's generally what happens.
Yeah, the photos I've seen, they've been kind of disguised in a way.
Yes.
Um, they haven't been in their full-blown liveries yet, right?
Well, well, these days they have media launches, but actually it's a livery launch more than anything else. The Red Bull was whatever. They don't want to give too many secrets away. It's always been the same, Martin.
Hang on a second. You said at the start when I asked you about plenty of motorsport in the UK, you said something about it's been fairly quiet after, did you say debacle in Abu Dhabi? Or
No, I said
just what
sand in
happened?
Abu Dhabi. No, what happened in Abu Dhabi? But it
Yes,
went
yeah.
on. It went on and on and on and on. It got a bit boring in the end.
Oh, is
But
that so the media's mainly been focusing on the outcome of the World Championship?
yes, I think it's also the manner in which it happened. I think that's the issue. There's- What happened on the track, but it was the how the rules were interpreted or weren't interpreted. It was a bit of a
Well, how
upside down.
what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it was the ending we should have seen, or you think it was the wrong decision?
I think what the rules weren't applied consistently, and that's really where it is. Maybe I suppose you could look at it in a bit deeper. That it's now controlled by Liberty. They want to make more of a show of it. Whatever they got their hands, going back to was it the Belgian Grand Prix when they only did a few laps, which
Mhm.
it kept it. I mean, one of the teams always want to try and win the last race because that carries that momentum right the way throughout the rest of the dull period until they start racing again. Whether it was I think there's a difference as to whether it's the driver you felt should win or who won. That's another matter altogether. It was pretty consistent.
So do you
I
think the
know
right driver won?
the right driver. Well, you got to look at it over the whole season, haven't you? It's not the preference I would have had, to be honest. But I know that you've diverted your Schumacher fan worship to Verstappen now. I can see, but it is the consistency of the rules. I think. I mean, I think the thing has changed. I mean, the poor guy, Michael, whatever his name was,
Massey.
who's yeah, he's the full maybe made them suppose they have to. But one also you got to remember is that there's a brand new president who's the FIA, and of course, as in any organisation, when a new guy comes in, he wants to make his mark, and that was the way of his making his mark.
Yeah, but he
But
wasn't president at the last race, though.
nobody was president where, with all of the inquiry and that sort of thing.
Yeah, true, true.
And he had to be seen. There's so much. I mean, I think what is wrong is to have the team managers, bending the ear of the race steward. I mean, I can remember back in the old Caterham days when we were in Malaysia. I was the race steward for a couple of events for my sins. And then you realise why it's so complicated and why it's so very strict. Because I think if you look at it from the television point of view, without that, you don't realise what the guy's doing. Also, you go with Herbie and
Charlie.
Charlie. Thank you for that. Um, they made it look easy because they've been around for so long. They could anticipate something could happen, what the result would be even before it actually happened. They from experience. There's so much going on that it's become. I mean, like life has become very complicated.
Yeah, and I think a lot of fans don't realize or seem to forget that it's not just one man in that race control. There's a team of
And
stewards there that are collaborating with each other. There's the driver steward, the guest driver steward as well. So there's half a dozen or more guys there discussing it and talking about it. And it's just Michael Massey who's the kind of representative who has to enforce the final decision.
and you've got to remember it's got to be done in very strict timing. And I know that both the Red Bull and Mercedes were bending his ear, but he was also
Mm.
trying a number of other things that were going on. And it's a high pressure environment, and sometimes people get it wrong.
True, true. Um, I think maybe your camera's a little bit slow tonight, a little bit choppy, but that's all right. We can work with that. Yeah, I mean, I am talking to an FIA race director, who's a representative in Asia, to come on the show and have a chat about that. So hopefully he can come on soon. Um, but yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. Well, I'm coming from a McLaren perspective, considering you worked for them for 17 or 18 years, and I'm kind of thinking from a Ron Dennis aspect, so to speak. I mean, for one thing, do you think that the Abu Dhabi incident would have happened in the 80s and 90s?
No,
And well, definitely not under Charlie, right?
no, that's right.
But
But then
then, sorry.
thing, thing, things have changed so much. The safety car comes out so quickly. Whenever there's an incident on the track, and okay, you've got to do it, but the race slows it down. And I suppose the real issue was when the Williams went on and caused the accident had the accident on the track. If you did the all of the cars to go back, you would have run out of the race, so that it would have entered a damp squig, and maybe that's why they wanted to keep the momentum actually still going.
Yeah, and when you just mentioned now how Toto and Christian were on the blower to Massey quite regularly during the race, is that something you think Ron Dennis would have taken advantage of himself?
Well, it didn't happen in those days, and it is a fairly recent phenomenon. But I mean, it just puts added pressure. The stewards are there to control the race, and they have to be consistent. But also, they don't have to be pestered by the team managers as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ron had his fair share of having to confront the stewards and race control plenty of times after the race.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure he would have loved the opportunity to be able to confront them on the pit wall during the race.
Well, yeah, but in latter years, Ron wasn't fully operational. He was one step beyond. So they brought on, there's another team principal or a team manager, and it's a different thing altogether. But I
And
mean,
speaking, sorry,
no, carry on.
no, keep going. I was going to change the subject slightly.
Um, no, I was going to say much more. Really, I mean, it is what it is. You've got to look over the whole season. I think there's got to be consistent, and I think that one of the things that is track rules. There's too many rules, but there's too many rules in life. I think. If the track limits was obeyed, or if there wasn't, at the moment they've got curbs that they can go out as far as, and they've got to keep the wheel on one wheel still on the track. If that was a solid brick wall like in Monaco, they'd be more cautious. So I think the drivers, in some ways, it's too safe because the drivers can get away with it. And Max did tend to push that to the limit. And you want racing, but you also want it to be fair.
But there's another point that I picked up on when you look at the replays of that final lap, and no one's really talking about this, is that when Max was hunting Lewis down, they were approaching turn 9, and Lewis just didn't try and fight Max. He didn't try and defend that turn, and that was the turn that Max easily undershot Lewis and passed him on the
But
inside. And it's like, well, Lewis kind of opened the door for Max to get by, or didn't close it anyway. He wasn't
they're
defending his position on that last
tires.
lap.
Tires. Max was on brand new tires. Lewis was on tires that were down, and they just didn't have the grip. I mean,
Mm,
it was inevitable. If you've got a fresh set of tires, you've got a huge advantage.
yeah, true, true.
I think the tire was the issues there.
Yeah. Speaking of Ron, you worked closely with him. I mean, you were the senior marketing manager for the McLaren F1 team from 1985 to 2002. So you were very much involved with the team during the golden years. Would you say the 80s up until 91 were McLaren's golden years?
I think so. I'd stretch it a bit further through to well, you've got also got to take towards the end of the 98 and 99 as well. But that was I think so. I know you had the two, well, 89, for example, you had the two best drivers in the world, 88 and 89, two best drivers in the world. And, friction was inevitable. I mean, I remember it got to the stage where they all pallied together. But towards the end of 89, you have to go into the motorhome and say, right, Ayrton, this is what you've got to do for this particular promotion. And you're sitting next to him was Alan, you go up to Alan and say, Alan, this is what you've got to do. There was a ball between the two. But I mean, it was a great show. It's a great show. But racing has changed. I think where McLaren, people used to work for Ron first and foremost, and then they worked for McLaren. That's the philosophy. And where it was different was it was a bunch of, I won't say a bunch of misfits, but it was a very dynamic, varied people with ability that worked together when they all came together as one particular package. And that, racing was different. The amount of hours the mechanics would work, what their abilities were going to be, and it's changed now. It's got bigger, it's more dynamic, and but I suppose for anyone who goes into motorsport and into Formula One, it's always going to be the glory years for them. It's just my generation is just getting a bit older now, and they remember the golden years through slight rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, true, true. Well, I remember when you were here, and I think it was 17 or 18. We spent some time in the McLaren garage. It was the years the team had that awful black and grey outfit. I
Right.
think Alonso was with them, right? And
It's probably why it's black.
and and I remember there was one of the team members was the only team member left from your days. I forget his name, but I remember him telling us how when Zach and Monsoir took over, how they basically told everyone that, this the Ron era is done. Forget about his procedures, forget about his rules. This is how we're going to do it now. And I remember seeing you and Bob as well, Bob McMurray, and you guys were basically in shock about the drastic change from the Ron Dennis run team to the new Zach and Monsoir run team. And yeah, you had quite a few things to say about that.
You always get, as I think I mentioned earlier, you get someone coming into a new job, a new position. They used to have a nuclear broom. I mean, they went through a lot of the staff were left, valued staff, but also, I suppose people would work with Ron for a number of years, and the tendency was for people to continue on working because it was a good environment. And as I say, you go back, you work for Ron. It was. I remember that the conversations that we had, and they had. If you worked for McLaren time, you were ingrained with this making things look neat, tidy, efficient, and all that sort of thing. They go to tremendous extremes. For example, the British Grand Prix had tiles, actually laid down tiles onto the floor because we had the sponsor courtholes and they had a good product as such. But it took it to a whole new level as such. And you could put a whole bunch of McLaren people in a room, and if some of the pictures are upside down or at different angles, you'd have someone moving around, adjusting. I mean, I'm the same when I look at the pictures, and I've got a lot of pictures in my study here, and trying to make sure that they're all in the right angle. It just annoys you and niggles you. But you realise that actually it's having a clean, precise working environment, and that's where it actually came from, and to be sufficiently organised.
Well, that was, yeah. I mean, one thing we picked up at our during our time in the McLaren garage was there were team members, not necessarily mechanics, but other team members who, growing their hair long, having stubble, their shirts were untucked, and I remember you saying this. Just Ron would never have stood for such a thing.
Well, the film crews is a good example. You used to get guys walking around in the earlier years like that, and it got to the rule, right? If you're going to have a film crew come in, they've got to look relatively smart. Black trousers, white shirt, or whatever, the sort of standard type of uniform. But they've got to look smart because it's image. That's what it boils down to. And then you look at the pictures of the cars in the 70s, and they're in car garages and car parks, and on fields and all that sort of thing, and it changed dramatically. But it's about a mental sort of thing. I mean, you're probably the same. You need your clear desk, because if you don't, you go with piles of paper and all that sort of thing. You can never find anything. It's all about to be inefficient. I presume you haven't changed since then.
No, it is actually, because I've got my setup here, so my desk is relatively clean. But some of us geniuses perform better in a mess. But that's just science.
No, it's just you trying to justify it. I know your secrets.
This is about you now, this podcast. Dear. So, do you miss the days of working with the team and traveling and being part of the championship?
I loved it. I spent 13 years on the road. I suppose. I did somewhere working for McLaren. I did 169 Grand Prix, which
Wow.
was a. And in those days, we were doing averaging about uh, 13 of 16 races as such. I think it puts it in perspective now when you see the sheer number of races they've got, and it seems to be continually growing. And I think they just signed up Imola. They're going back to Imola, which is actually a great circuit as such.
Mhm.
Um, I've lost my thread. What were we talking?
Whether you miss the days of traveling with the
I missed the
championship?
days. Yes, yes. Sorry. I enjoyed it at the time. I don't know if I could want to do it anymore. I've had my trials. Some great days, but I'm quite happy not to travel too much. I don't think, and also it's a young man's game as such, because you're on the road, and actually what happens is the team becomes your family, and it's because you end up spending more time with the team than you do with your own individual family. And it often has, if anyone who's got long-term partners or marriages, it puts a hell of a strain on that sort of thing. I
Well,
I, I
you
remember. I remember, I had a period where I cut back on the Grand Prix because I wanted to spend more time with them, and I realised they had their own life, and it was like, well, come on, Dad, thanks, nice to see you, but when you off again, because we're going to go and do this. So, but it's a lifestyle, and it's habitual, and it's addictive. I think more than anything, it is an addictive lifestyle. But then I think again in life you have two types of people: those that travel and those that don't travel, and neither understands each other of them. If you've got the travel bug, you should still have it. But I'm quite happy in the UK now. Well,
mm. Well, you had your kids, Ben and Becky, while you were traveling with the team, right?
Ben was born the year I started full-time traveling back in 1988. Bex was a few more years after, a couple of more years after that. But uh, I'm making up time with them now, which is good.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And with the traveling, I'm just remembering another story you told me some time back, and it was brought up a few months back about how some of the fans think that the team organizes everything for the driver when they're traveling, and the driver travels with the team and so forth. But back in those days, that wasn't the deal, right? And you had to help out Senna or someone at one stage who couldn't pay his hotel bill or something. Was that the story?
Well, it varied. In terms of the hotel bills, the drivers are responsible for their own hotels and for their expenses. Cars are usually provided by the car manufacturer. So we had Peugeots or um, Mercedes and whatever. So there is that. But I mean, I've been where I've had to for speed and everything and doing the whole deal. So we used to race in Phoenix, Arizona, and
Mm,
it was a bit like user days in Jerez. You had about 30,000 people watching, and then everyone came in to know who because there was such a small crowd. But we used to stay in this hotel called the Phoenician Resort, which was a pretty magnificent sort of place in Scottsdale. And I had my company American Express card, and I had to. The clock was ticking. I was sorting all the bills out. The bill came to $25,000, which
mm.
was
For the team.
no, no. That was my paying for the people that were staying in the Phoenician Resort.
Oh, right, yeah.
But hire cars, they got used to it, and it varies as to which driver did what. I mean, a lot of the top drivers had aeroplanes. Senna had his plane, whatever.
Mm,
I mean, that happens, and it's because it's easier. I mean, they do so many miles. It's wonderful live in Monaco, but if you haven't got a private jet, it's not one of the easiest places to get in and out of, as such.
yeah,
And most of the drivers live in Monaco. It's just coincidental that there's no tax in Monaco, but it's good for training and stuff like that. But but the teams, the drivers would on the long more happen more actually on the races outside of Europe, where they do travel very much more with you just because the flights coincide. But yeah, it was fun. I can actually remembering looking at some pictures the other day. Went to the Australian Grand Prix, and especially when it was in Melbourne, because it went from Adelaide at the end of the season to Melbourne at the beginning of the following season. And of course, more bits, more things to do. There was a group of us travelling, and there was a hire car, which was one of the what was the? It's like a Granada in Europe, but it's a big Holden or Ford type
oh, yeah.
vehicle in Australia. I was sat in the driver's seat, as with the steering wheel as close as possible, and the whole car, including a chassis, was loaded into the back of into my car, and that's what we used to take. It's an incredible amount of bits and pieces. Coming on from that, Jonathan Palmer was our test driver for a period,
Oh,
and he'd
right.
always go out on the Friday night, and invariably he had to take bits and pieces for the car, so he had a very heavy suitcase. However, there was one race where he didn't really need to take many extra things because they got all the bits and pieces, so they didn't want him to feel left out. So they loaded bricks into his suitcase, so he had to take those across, just making sure that he had a sufficient importance in the team. In fact, I think it was Gerhard said, if Jonathan, he won't like me for saying this, we say, if Jonathan could drive as quick as he was talked, he'd be a world champion.
Well, Gerhard
But
was a bit of a practical joker, wasn't he, in the team?
very much so, very much so. He was known for, especially in the Monaco, you have the baskets for the back of the boats, whatever, and so you take your shoes off when you go onto the boat, sort of letting people's shoes disappear. But I did see that they played various tricks. One they did with Ayrton, and this was Ron did this. They built a cage around his suitcase, around his briefcase, and locked it all up so he could be delayed. Gerhard also, I think, managed to get hold of Ayrton's passport and changed the photograph. It was in there from his own picture to a picture of certain parts of this young lady.
What stuck a dirty photo in Ayrton Senna's passport?
Yes, allegedly.
Allegedly,
All
yeah.
sorts of daft things.
Didn't he
I'm trying to
throw
think.
Ayrton's briefcase out of a helicopter or something?
Right, yeah. Gerhard got hold of his briefcase, and was trying to empty the contents, but that didn't work, so he threw the whole bag out. But Gerhard got it. They got his own back on him as well because they managed to, in one of the tests, get his. I think it was in Estoril for some. There was a test. They got hold of his credit cards and they drilled a hole in all of his credit cards and put a bolt in the middle of them, so his credit cards couldn't be terribly used. There was always a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
What, Gerhard's they did it to Gerhard's credit cards? Or Senna's credit
Yes,
card? Okay,
yeah.
Gerhard
There was
Berger.
another one, Portuguese Grand Prix. It was the end of season, and the drivers, don't they used to drink a little bit, but now they're quite abstemious. And they had a little. The whiskey that was in the restaurant was Dimple whiskey, and Gerhard challenged Ayrton to a bit of a drinking match. What Ayrton didn't realise was that Gerhard was watering the plants with his whiskey.
So
So
Senna was doing the drinking and Gerhard stayed sober.
yeah. We did a similar thing with one of our press ladies. She was challenged to a drink of sake in the Japanese Grand Prix, and she was with a certain former friends and former colleagues. Was having the drinking bout with her, and of course he was to say the same thing. He was watering the plants. She got very upset, and she realised he was cheating.
Well, I suppose your time at McLaren whilst Berger and Senna were teammates was a lot more upbeat and fun times than it was when Senna and Prost were at each other's throat.
Well, yes, because Gerhard wasn't a threat to Ayrton. Once Ayrton established that he had the edge, he wasn't a threat. It's like anything. You've got two teammates or two people who are very ultra competitive. Look at Ayrton. The battle between Ayrton and Alain, and when Alain stopped racing, Ayrton was really friendly with him. It's the absolute determination, and then I think like any a lot of guys that are really successful have some certain things missing in their lives that we have, whether it's humility or whatever. But they're absolutely focused on what they want to achieve and what they want to get, which means they become very, very focused. For example, Ron and Ayrton arguing, negotiating about his contract, and what Ayrton thought he was giving away $1 million, when in fact it was $1 million per year he was giving away, and they did it on the toss of a coin. So they do extraordinary things, but they're extraordinary characters.
So that was what? So Ron was negotiating his contract with Senna,
It's a
and
3-year
what's
contract.
okay?
And
So Ron thought he wanted 1 million for 3 years, but Senna wanted the 1 million for each of the 3 years.
yeah, it was something like that. But it was worked to Ron's advantage. Ayrton didn't realise that it was for 3 years.
Right, right. Yeah, well, I remember '94 and '94 Imola, where Senna and Prost, because Prost was commentating for the French TV, and he went down to the grid, and they basically kissed and made up just before the race, right?
They got to know each other quite well. The pressure was on, but that was the most bizarre weekend. I mean, it was like 12 years bad luck all culminating together. Just to run through it, we had a sponsor who was taken ill on the Wednesday. On the Friday, Rubens Barrichello went off and broke his arm. On the Saturday, Roland Ratzenberger very tragically was killed, and that put the focus on it. On the Sunday, at the start of the start of the race, there was an accident where one of the cars Pedro Lamy went into the back of another car, so they had the race car, and whereas now today they have the Mercedes-Benz ultra powerful cars, he had a little Fiat that just wasn't quick enough going around the circuit, so he was pushing us hard. So they had, and the wheel, during the accident, the wheel had gone off and bounced off and went into the spectator facilities, so someone was injured there.
I think it was a marshal was up down or something.
Yeah, I was a team member. But then when they got the clear, there was Michael Schumacher was pushing incredibly hard with Ayrton, and Ayrton had been a bit. He couldn't understand why Michael Schumacher was so quick, and he was struggling because, bearing in mind, he was in a Williams, which had been a super dominant car from the previous year. Then they got rid of all things like traction control and everything like that. So it was not the most sympathetic car to actually drive. And then he went off. The race was stopped or suspended for a period of time. And then when they went out again, there was one of the team members was changing a tire, went and got knocked over. And then to cap it all, going back through the Mont Blanc tunnel as the cars were going back to the UK, the Phoenix, the Pacific Race Transporter, which was one of the teams, caught fire. So it was like 12 years better. And then 2 weeks later, Monaco. And the start of first practice, which has up until now was always on a Thursday. After a while, it all went. Carl Wendlinger went off and had an accident and was put into a coma, and he just thought it was bad. It was bad news. And because before that, it would have been 12 years before that anyone had been killed in a Grand Prix car, in a Formula One car, at a race as such.
That's right. You were at the Imola Grand Prix, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And when we went, and they shepherded the McLaren and the Williams team, certainly on the flight home back to Gatwick, and you almost had the feeling we were all very relieved when we actually got back onto the ground. Because the thinking, well, the way luck's going, something's going to happen to plane as well. So it was significant. But that actually allowed Max Mosley, who was the FIA president, to do a lot of introduce a lot of modifications to the cars, and the safety of the cars days is very much goes back to the safety implications that came in '94.
Yeah, true, especially with the high-rise side bits around the helmet on the cockpit.
Well, do you look at the '88 McLaren? The side of the cockpit was below the shoulder level.
Yeah, I was looking at
And
pictures the other day about that. It was just absolutely crazy, when you look at it, but it was something that no one ever considered really. It was just something that never crossed anyone's mind that, serious damage could happen because of that.
yeah, things progressively develop over a period of time. But then you look back some of the cars back in the '50s, or go back even earlier. I think these guys are amazing, and the lives that the actual how long they lived. I mean, every other weekend a driver could have been killed. So, but
Mm,
again, I think that the biggest difference is there was a deep respect for each driver, because every driver drove 99.9%, but there was a margin dungeon. Now I think certainly a lot of the drivers who drive over 100%, they do it because they know they're not going to get bitten by it. The chances of them having being killed is very small because the cars are so incredibly strong.
true, true. So would you be saying that drivers from what, 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, they were a lot more courageous, right? They were true gladiators of the sport, whereas now, I mean, I think that the only serious accident we've had in the past 10 years or so with all these new safety modifications is the big crash that Grosjean had. Was that last year or the year before?
The year before, but
Where
then he got out of the car and he walked away unscathed.
true,
Apart from
true. And then before
um,
that was Jules Bianchi, I think, was the only one where he went off at Suzuka in the pouring rain and basically almost got decapitated from going under the crane, the
yeah,
crane truck.
yeah, that's true. And that was just, but accidents are freak anyway. Everyone, no one tries to do those sort of things deliberately. And if it happens, I mean, Ayrton's accident when he was killed was a freak accident because a bit of the suspension went back and pierced his helmet. And if it had been a couple of millimeters either in a different direction, he'd have been fine. His body was fine.
Mm,
So I think when your time, personally believe that when your time's up, your time's up. But he
true.
was very effective that weekend in Imola. He was very effective. If you look, if you watch the film, you can see his mannerisms. Ayrton used to get into the cockpit, and the world would close in progressively over the weekend. And he'd sit in the car. He wouldn't get out. He'd keep his helmet on. You look at what he was at Imola. He was a different man. He was a troubled man.
And you had because you had to work closely with the drivers. Did you spend much time with Senna away, whether it was away from the track or from outside of the car? Did
I
you get
drove. I
to
was
know him?
yes. I even drove him back to Woking because it was there was one of the wettest races, and I think there was onboard footage of he spun it 3 times. And he was doing that. He demonstrated that. We land in London about 5:30 in the morning, and he was demonstrating with the luggage trolley how many times he actually spun. And I ended up having to giving him a lift back to Woking. And I remember him saying, "Peter, you're a member of the Honda Marlboro McLaren team, and you're driving a Renault." But Ayrton was a fascinating character. And the one thing that they say that a person's character is often shown through handshake. Gerhard would crush your hand, he's very strong. Ayrton had actually a very limp, soft handshake. And he was a man of two, he really had two sides to him. There was the super aggressive individual you saw on the track, and there's a very kind, gentle side you also saw to him. But worked closely with him. I remember walking. Let's go back to the Phoenix Grand Prix, and we were in this big, massive, big hotel, and I had to take him from one function to another. And it was just the two of us walking through these great big corridors and whatever. And he came across. There was a lady there who was fan. She was absolutely agog that she met her hero, and he calmed her down and took a photograph and was very, very kind with her. Likewise, a similar thing happened at Suzuka when Ayrton won the Grand Prix, and we were taking him to the Honda tent for a celebration. And it got to say there was about various marketing people that were working for the team or for the sponsors, and we provided this shield, that he walked in the middle of it. And just in front of us, there was this little Japanese lady that fell over, and we stopped and picked her up, and she looked at him, said, and a big smile on her face, took a photograph and went away. And he had that effect on people. He was hugely. He was probably one of the most unique drivers I think they had, because not only was he ruthless, but also had an incredible brain to actually operate the cars. He was also quite worldly, whether that got to his spiritual beliefs or his business acumen and all those sort of things. I don't think there's been another driver that has got ticks all the boxes the way that they're tend to do. And Lewis does a lot. He's probably by far, and I know you might not agree with me, but at the moment he is the most in tune racing driver. I think Max is still on the ascendancy, and he will actually develop even further. But even so, they don't have that outer charisma that an Ayrton had. So he was. I suppose what I'm saying is he was more than just a sports superstar. He was a pretty special guy
who would have been president of Brazil had he lived.
Yeah. We was setting all the deals up. He got an Audi dealership and various other bits and pieces. He was getting ready for the next stage of his life, and you're absolutely right. I wouldn't have been at all surprised that he had become president of Brazil, because of what he did for the people of Brazil. He gave them something to hope for, and he gave them a sense of pride because it was going through a tough time. And he a lot of the money that he was ruthless in charging the money and getting the money out. For example, it was $1 million a race, and he went up until the first few races of '93 with the Ford engine car. He didn't turn up until he knew that the money was there. So in Imola that year, he arrived actually on the Friday morning because he was waiting. It was a gamemanship. But I've lost the thread now. But he's.
Sorry, continue.
Sorry. No, after you.
I remember you had a special dinner with Ayrton one year at Monaco.
Yes, that was true. And these are sort of special things that you tend to find. Thanks for prompting me. Ayrton had an apartment in Monaco. He also had a place out in Portugal where he stayed. And Monaco it sounds fantastic. It's all the beautiful people. It's a complete pain in the bottom to actually move around and to actually work on that sort of thing. And everything's in different individual different locations, which are all buttoned with cars and where the track goes. And I had to meet Joe Ramirez, who's the team coordinator, to get passes, the passes he used for the sponsors and everything. So I arranged to meet him outside of Ayrton's apartment. And he was bringing up a lot of Ayrton's trophies, because there's always this thing, who has the real trophy and who has the replica? Because McLaren's contract did say that the originals go with McLaren, then the drivers get a copy made. Anyway, Joe had a lot in his hands to take up. So I volunteered to take him up. When we came up, then there was Ayrton and Justin, his housekeeper. And they got talking, and Joe had a special relationship because he spoke Portuguese and Spanish, and he had a little bit of influence when Ayrton joined the team. And you just sensed Ayrton was a bit lonely, and he invited us to stay for dinner, which his housekeeper cooked, and it was just. I was just there agog, thinking, wow, this is just absolutely special. And and then sort of tales, and that's where he said, one day I think I'll drive for Ferrari. And I think it's been said, but the 25 million that Michael Schumacher got when he went to Ferrari was originally penciled in for Ayrton. So probably Ayrton would have driven a couple of years for Williams and then finished his career off and driving for Ferrari. Someone's at the front door. The dog's making an awful lot of noise in a minute. This is live broadcasting, folks.
Yeah, remember the days of us doing media training for the young drivers?
Oh yeah, trying to do that sort of thing.
The speaking of Monaco, though, wasn't Monaco? So you started with McLaren in '85, which I think was Prost. It was still Prost and Lauda, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My first Grand Prix, actual Grand Prix, was at Silverstone, British Grand Prix.
85, right.
And it was raining, and I was in the motorhome, and we were trapped because it was raining so hard. And I had to pinch myself because I was a fan to start to get involved in it. There was Nicky Lauda was out having his breakfast of yogurt and strawberries. Alan was having his coffee. There was Jackie Stewart there, giving the world the benefit of his knowledge. And there was James Hunt as well. And there was little old me standing there taking all that in. But then the longer you stay with it, you start to get to know the guys. And, the guys like Martin Brundle, who was a breath of fresh air in some respect, he joined the team because he liked doing PR, having had to fight Ayrton, and there was, I know I'm obligated to do this, but I not tell Ron I'm not going to do this sponsor function or such. And then Martin said, I love doing this. Mark Blundell too was a great mate and all sort of thing, and David Coulthard. So I think the older you get and you get to know them more, that you're still very aware that you're with your heroes, but on the other hand, you have a different sort of relationship with them.
Wasn't there 85 Monaco? Wasn't around that time that it was your first job with Ron, or working directly with Ron to do something about a grand piano on a yacht?
Yes. It was 88. In 1988, we had a big sponsor function, and with working with Ron previously, I had to go and find. We were moving factories, and I had to go in the furniture or the wall coverings or whatever, which we did eventually. And I looked up, and I then toured 5 of them with Ron, and then we whittled it down for a German company called Voco, and that was for all the paneling. So when we moved into Albert Drive, well, one of the deal with them was that every year that we would do a sponsor function for them at a particular Grand Prix. So the first one was in '86 at Brands Hatch. So we literally helicoptered them, all about 80 odd people, in from Leeds Castle to get to the circuit and whatever. But then they decided they all wanted to go to Monaco. Well, Monaco is, packed. We had, potentially at least 80 people, and we couldn't get the hotel rooms. So thinking laterally, and this is where Ron really comes into his element, we approached Cunard, and we took the luxury boat, luxury boat, ship. I mean, it was huge, 56 berth, called Sea Goddess, and we parked that actually on the front there. In those days, that was £250,000 a week to actually hire.
Wow.
And we used it as a floating hotel as such. So that was, but we had there was Hugo Boss had some guests there, and one of their guests was a German musician and pianist called Eustace France. And the idea was that he was going to play piano on the deck. Well, we thought we'd been headed assured that we'd get the Steinway to go up to be moved, but of course that didn't actually transpire. So we're then going through amazing, got completely fascinated about how we get a Steinway piano on the deck of this boat. And standing with Ron, thinking, he said, "I bet you $1,000 we could get it in. We could helicopter in." I think, well, maybe it would be, but it's a bit of a liability to have a helicopter with a Steinway hanging off of it to go on
Just
there.
get my helicopter.
Yeah, but that's the sort of thing we did. And likewise, we went to the American Grand Prix when it went back to Indianapolis. We had to do things to explain what was different to a Formula One car than an Indy car. An Indy car is probably quicker because it winds up the speed on an oval as such than a Formula One car. They look very similar. And we're also aware that lots of people would be wanting to use the drivers for various promotions. So we effectively put on a show with the drivers. So the first year we put on a show and we did interviews with the drivers, and we used the Cirque du Soleil to actually do some acts. So it's just teamwork and precision and various other things. So taking them, that was a way of illustrating with the cars. Then the following year was 2001, and this was then we had September the 11th, and this was the American Grand Prix was 2 weeks afterwards. It's interesting because in those days, getting on the plane at Heathrow, we were very strict security. When we got off the plane at the other end, nothing was particularly restrictive at all. But a lot of the companies were sending their guests by road. Anyway, we did it with the magicians Penn and Teller. We
Oh
had
yeah.
a
Oh, they're great.
pretty amazing thing there. And
Yeah.
unbeknownst that was my final Grand Prix. It was actually Murray Walker's final Grand Prix and Joe Ramirez's final Grand Prix. I remember interviewing Mika at the front about, so Mika, what's your strategy for the race? He said, well, basically, I'm going to make a good start. I'm going to get into the first corner. I'm going to stay there till I see the checkered flag, and he did. But at the end of it, they sort of the very the high ups of Mercedes Benz were coming up and saying, "Oh, well done, Peter! What a great job!" And Ron's didn't give out platitudes very often, but he said a lot of people have been saying good things about you. We've had 2 nights and no screw ups at all. Well done. And that was about the biggest response I got from it.
Well done, well done. Well, speaking of Cirque du Soleil, was it early 2018 when Ron Dennis was hosting his official, was it a thank you or a goodbye for the
Leaving
McLaren?
leaving party for 3,000 people.
That's right. You went to that.
I did. It was spectacular. But Ron has had a friendship. The guy behind Cirque du Soleil is Guy Leviter, and he started as a street performer and he's built it up. And actually, while I was in Canada one year, I actually went to their facilities, and it was like McLaren. It was prestige. It was very, very well organised. We'd done a number of Christmas parties and various things with the Cirque du Soleil. But Ron had always said that he was just a chapter in the history of McLaren, and he left under. Well, they say no one really, very few people leave through the front door when they leave McLaren. It's usually through the back door. So, and he negotiated his severance deal or whatever. But it was a thank you to the staff and all the people that had actually been involved. It was an amazing evening.
It was at Royal Albert Hall, wasn't it?
Royal Albert Hall, yes, it was. and that's just showed, the caliber of the man, that he'd do something like that, and far-reaching vision. And then, like I think we were saying, he just built a new house really near Henley, massive house. He's in the process of building. The plans have come out to what they're going to do, so it's going to be a huge mansion. But he likes projects. He likes the project, and building the McLaren Technology Centre as such was the same sort of thing, infinite detail. And he has an amazing ability to be able to organise things like that.
So he, as a thank you to 3,000 former employees of McLaren, he rented the Royal
He
Albert Hall and had Cirque du Soleil fly over and a massive party.
Almost. What he did was he bought a show out, because the
Right.
Cirque were playing. Cirque were playing there, but it was exclusively a Friday night deal. And at that time, I was living in Malaysia. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I came back.
You
It's
left.
one of those things you have to do.
Yeah, you went back to London specifically for that event.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Speaking of his new house, you showed me this. Uh, what are you doing reading the Daily Mail?
It's one of the ones that's still free. You can free to read on the internet.
So you sent me this today
But this is what I
about.
was. That's what I've just been mentioning.
Oh, hang on a second. I think I've done that wrong. Ah, yeah, here we go. So yeah, Ron Dennis is building a 30 million pound James Bond villain
Mega
style.
Man.
Sorry, I was going to say what village? What? Come on.
Brilliant.
So he's going to have an underground tunnel from his
Yeah,
house or mansion here, and it's going to go underground for his boat to exit the tunnel and land in the Thames River.
yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if the water separates as well.
Well, he has the power, right? Majestic Ron.
But it
Ah.
just shows, the ability to think things through and do them. He's made his money. He's now going to be 74, 75.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the photo
So
they've got on the newspaper website's not that clear actually, but
yeah, I think
yeah.
that's the illustration. I think that's part of the planning application.
Yeah, because I thought he bought a huge mansion shortly after his exit from McLaren.
Don't know. Don't know.
But yeah, because it wasn't his departure from McLaren wasn't well, it wasn't exactly
It was a
a
boardroom
celebration
coup.
of it wasn't a the retirement that he wanted, right? It
Well,
wasn't the retirement he wanted.
as I said, very few people leave out the front door. They usually out the back door for various things. Um, yeah, there was a falling out with him and Mansell Ogier.
Mm.
And I don't know the ins and outs of it, but they were very, very, very close friends. Mansell was a real gentleman who died not that long ago, very sadly. And it led to Ron leaving, and then there was a lot of new people were brought on board as well. So it was, like anything, you can't go on forever. The Honda relationship didn't work terribly well compared to when it was before. But I suppose that's also, you find people tend to believe in some of the images that they might have. Just because you've got a glory in one generation doesn't mean they're always going to be the same. Same with football, I suppose, and various other sort of sports. So just because you go back with Honda doesn't mean you're going to you're going to have instant success. You've got to put the hard yards into it.
True, true. Yeah, I've danced. I've been on the dance floor with Monsa OJ. Um, it was. 2009. Yeah, that's when I was the editor-in-chief of Autosport Asia magazine, and I went to the Autosport Awards. Lewis had won the championship. Sorry, this was 2008, and, yeah, the
I was
after
there.
party was. Oh, you were there? I
Was that
remember
what was it?
I was having a lot of drinks with Tom Christensen as well, but the after party was at the Hard Rock Cafe, and, Ron and Mika were sitting in one of the booths, and by that stage, it was free flow drinks the whole night, and we're in black ties, so I was well and truly in my prime, and, they were talking to 2 lovely young ladies, and Mika remembered me, because I had spent some time with him in Singapore earlier that year. He's like, you're the Singapore guy with the book," because I had this massive, massive book, Formula One book, and, I was joking around, "Do you guys need help with these ladies?" And Ron's sitting Ron's sitting there going, "Back off, back off, back off." And I'm just having a joke around, and then he signals Monsar over, and he's like Monsar grabs me and takes me out. "Let's come this way," and we're having a drunken dance on the dance floor, and yeah, that was my moment. Then shortly after, next thing I know, I was picking up Anthony Hamilton, Lewis's father, from the floor. He fell down the stairs, absolutely wasted.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. Yeah, pick him up, throw him in a black cab. Yeah, those were the days. Those were the days. Ah, man. So, yeah, I suppose we can't get too much into Ron's departure of, who, what, where, when, and how, but like you said, there was a fallout with Monsar. But,
In my not, I've spoken to him a few times when I bumped into him. I know when we were in Singapore, but my knowledge really is up to when I left McLaren.
right, right. Yeah, true, true. So, yeah, I mean, it must have been a fantastic time during that era. I mean, you were very close, well, in terms of you had to separate Senna and Prost, right? At events. I mean, there was so much down each other's throats.
Not so
Uh,
much. It's like an invisible wall between the two. You know, one didn't. When one was there, the other one didn't exist in his mind, or as such, and they got political. But Alan always had this feeling that because Ayrton was responsible for bringing in, or had an input about bringing in Honda to work with McLaren, and Alan always thought that Ayrton was given extra advantages. I mean, whether that was true or not, I mean, there's various different interpretations of it as well. And I have to say, Alain is a real gent, and I really sort of came across. He's always sort of guy that whenever you see him, you would shake out his hand, and even when he came back as a consultant for the team as well, you know, he was good, a gentleman, and I think people talk, you know, they talk a lot about Ayrton, they talk about Lewis and whoever the current drivers may be at the time. They miss out the 4 world championships that Alain did as well, and I think his history gets a bit lost. And he was, you know, he as a driver, he was one of the cleverest, as we call the professor.
yeah, I made that post on his birthday. I mean, it should have been at least 7 world championships, for Prost. I
I
mean,
actually drove him as well, so I have to say one of my the 80 the Christmas party. I was sent up to London in one of the company's Range Rovers, which was the early Range Rover that felt like a yacht because it just lolloped from such a high centre of gravity. And I had to pick Alain up for and bring him down to Woking. And then we also had we did near Gatwick Airport. There was a big hotel. It had a big round circular room, and we decorated that up as a cursed circus ring. And we actually had an elephant, so Alan actually appeared. Did a lap of the room on the top of an elephant.
The professor. Well, he did lose a championship by half a point.
Yeah, that was the weird
84.
thing, because that it was there were 16 races. You could only count your 11 best, and that
Well, that
happened
was
several.
yeah, that was 80. That was 89, 89, 88, 89 with Senna.
89.
That's when the 11 best counted, but the half a point was against Lauda, because one of the races, I think it was Monaco 84, that was stopped short, so they awarded half points. So, and at the end, he had to retire, or he came second behind Lauda, and eventually lost the world championship only by half a point.
Well, I think again it goes back to what we were saying at the very beginning. Championships are won over a season; they're not run over a race. And although that becomes the focal point, it's so consistency over the whole championship season. And Alain was trying to get the wet race stopped because of the conditions. And there was a certain young driver who was just started in Formula One, was about to take the lead, whose name happened to be Ayrton Senna, driving a.
That's right. The Tolman that had the sponsor, the Sefragato, I pronounced that wrong. The coffee brand, right, along that Tolman,
Yeah.
and it
Well,
was
they were Sigafredo.
yes, that's the one. Uh, and then Prost pulled up on the side of the chicane at the exit of the tunnel, I believe.
No, it was
I
no,
thought
it
that
was
was
on the
Senna.
start finish line.
Oh, right, right, right. Yeah, that's right. And Senna was hunting Prost down and could have won with the amount of laps left in the race. But yeah, the stewards stopped it early. And speaking of Prost, I'm drinking from my Prost mug. I got this Prost mug in his
Yeah,
helmet design, and it has his
very nice.
statistics here. And I've got the
That's
Senna one as
correct.
well. I got a Senna mug with his statistics. You can get them at benpotterart.com.
You got a Verstappen one yet? Have you?
No, I've got a James Hunt, Nicky Lauda, Prost, Senna, PK, and Hakkinen so
Oh
far, yeah.
right.
Ben Potter art and face masks as well.
Oh
Um,
yes.
there was, speaking of Royal Albert Hall, actually, these stories are coming back to me now that I mean, Peter and I worked together for several years here in Southeast Asia, running Asia Motorsport Development, a motorsport marketing business, doing sponsorship management and driver development and driver development. Um, and there was something else it was the 90s. Was it the Spice Girls you were looking after for the McLaren team launch in the late
No,
90s,
it was 97, and it all came about. I remember it very clearly because we had just signed, West were going to join the team, and after 23 years of being a red and white car with Marlboro, it was going to be silver. So we had to do something really big and very, very different. And we had a marketing meeting with an agency and with West and whatever, and we got into the realms of we have an aircraft carrier on the Mediterranean with ZZ Top playing on it and various other bits and pieces. They got more and more of the wall. And someone said, as a joke, I suppose we could always get the Spice Girls. Ha 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 ha. That's it. And that's where it started. And then he decided that it'd be quite a good idea. So Ron then started, he enjoyed it, doing negotiating with the guy who was the manager of the Spice Girls or whatever. and we did it in Alexander's in London, where we'd actually had a Christmas party in the previous year. And it was clever, but we had to make a real big impact because, as I say, we've been red and white for so many years. You had to do something totally different. So we did the unveil of the car, which was magically appeared under cloth, and you had like there was a guys on skates dancing. Not Midnight Express, but Starlight Express.
Starlight,
And
Midnight
then the
Express.
Spice Girls, that was another one. And it was in 3 parts. So we had the sponsors, we had the press, and then we had the fans who were all shipped in by MTV. So it was about in total. It was about 5,000 people came to the launch as such. But because of the rights situation, we had to be careful with the Spice Girls because they did 3 songs. When they say they lip synced them. They did not actually sing the tune.
You saw them rehearse, right?
Yeah, well, there was no photographs or anything like that, and somehow a photographer managed to get in and took a photograph of them, and I had to go and say, "Ron, I've got a bit of a problem here." Anyway, it was smoothed over, whatever. And then then on the stage, one of them tried to. I think it's now the present Mrs. Horner was trying to get him undo Mika's overalls. But anyway, it was
Ginger
many
Spice.
things. Yeah, something like that. But it was clever because it was a different way, but it was essentially going back, and we did a lot of from a marketing point of view, working with West. We had the West McLaren Mercedes team, or what did it specify? And we went to the thing, who drives a McLaren, a Mercedes? Well, we got Helmut Kohl was down. Who would be the West one? Well, that would be Sporty Spice. And then who would be McLaren? Well, that would be James Bond. And then we sort of changed the image and placed it. So, but what actually happened is that the Mercedes was the old image, became a younger image, and with West it became the other ways. They became a more an older brand as such from how they presented themselves. It was a very interesting time to actually work and develop it, which I suppose leads me on to talking. One of the things is that with motorsport, there's a different way of working, and it's very much one of the things that I've been developing is the winning team formula, which is all about using motorsport, using Formula One as a graphic comparison of what would happen. So, for example, the team thing stands for teamwork. So that during a pit stop, you've got 16, I think it's about 18, 20 people all working on the car. And you think now the world record to change a tire is 1.88 seconds, which was the Red Bull team. It's phenomenal, the speed. And then that's got a transferable knowledge because several of the teams have worked outside. And then I think it was Williams did something with operating theatre. You've got an operating theatre, and they'll communicate to each other, and there's a hierarchy. So you could use things to learn. So you're learning things to develop. Then you go to efficiency. How do you make the cars are very efficient? Probably the Formula One cars we've got at the moment are the most efficient they've ever been, and getting things right first time. Not having a problem down the line because you want to make sure your product is particularly good. And during the pandemic, there were a lot of teams were actually helping, doing various bits. They were re-engineering different aspects for the face masks and whatever. Then you've got ambition, to try and get the top guys. So when you think of the teams, probably Ron is one, and probably Toto Wolff is the other guy who've been far sighted in what they've actually to do and to lead, to lay the foundations for the team. And then from a driver's point of view, a driver wants to get everyone as associated around his car. So Ayrton, uh, Michael Schumacher, and Lewis all work very hard to work with their drivers. I mean, Michael Schumacher, if you took his speed, he was Mika maybe was marginally quicker, but it was actually Michael Schumacher's work ethic, be the first to arrive, last to depart, whatever, that actually made the difference. And then the final part, we talk about the teams and management, but it's also the biggest asset you have in a company is your staff. It's the software that goes with it. So I've been developing a presentation about that to use for how companies could look at motorsport to what they do, but also allows a fun element to make just if you have something funny or something humorous or illuminates and illustrates how you could actually do something and actually improve on it. So that's one of the reasons why it's called the routine formula.
Aha. And you're doing this presentation for companies?
For companies, yes, it's essentially and linking it through because it works. What I've done them with management meetings or whatever. You need to incentivize and make things different. Because what we used to do with Formula One was to give people an insight into what's going on. I mean, you're doing it it's interesting. Think of the male female psyche, and the men, we think we know it, we don't, but we think we do. The ladies probably not that interested until you can actually get them interested, and you'll put across different things about what goes on in motorsport in different terms. So, you know, a pit stop when they had refueling, you're basically the amount of fuel you're putting in is the same weight as the driver. Or what's it like to drive a Formula One car or sit in a Formula One car? Well, you're in a very reclining position. It's like putting your feet lying in the bath and putting your feet on the taps, or
Mm.
what it is to the amount of downforce that you generate. If you've got 2,500 kilos of downforce, that's the equivalent of having 25 rugby players all weigh about 100 kilos each. One of the statistics is that at a certain downforce, you could actually drive a Formula One car upside down. But we've never found a tunnel long enough or a driver stupid enough to actually go and do that sort of thing.
I've been waiting for that because that's always been I mean, that's been one of the key things that's been said over the past several decades about Formula One. I remember Murray Walker talking about it when I was growing up watching Formula One, how the cars generate so much downforce that you could, if they built a structure, drive a Formula One car on the ceiling. And it's
Yeah.
about time they did that. I mean, sure, I mean, they've done so many crazy things for other things before. I mean, surely there's gonna be a time now where we can do that as a demonstration, right? I mean, Red Bull
Yeah,
should be
well,
doing it, right? Spending their money on doing something crazy like that. They're into extreme sports. Let's, drive a
yeah,
Formula One car on the ceiling. Come on, Dietrich Mateschitz.
we did. We actually did. I with the first spoof about doing that and wrote it up in the company magazine. But the bottom line is you've got to get things closer, and I think Formula One has improved a lot, especially with the way Liberty has been running it, about getting the drivers closer to the individuals. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the gladiators fighting out there.
True, true. Speaking of liberty, I've got a what I wanna do with guests is my version of would you rather or this or that, and I call it to pit or stay out, where I have a few options here that I'm going to throw at you, and you give me your preferred option, and we can talk about it. And we'll start off with a couple of easy ones here. Uh, yeah, so this is called to pit or to stay out. All right, our first one. Prost or Senna?
To what? Would I?
Which
Would
one
I?
do you? Yeah, who would you choose, Prost or Senna?
Senna. Got
All
that.
right. What about Mansell or Damon Hill?
Damon Hill.
Why is that? You think Damon Hill was a better driver than Nigel Mansell?
Nobody's a nicer person.
Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, whether he should have been 96 world champion, that's another discussion.
When he got
Uh,
punted, you mean?
sorry.
When he got punted off, now that's where you needed the stewards. But anyway, we'll
Oh,
pass on. As
you
you
mean you mean when Damon Hill drove into the back of Michael Schumacher at the '94 Adelaide Grand Prix?
yeah, I don't think it was quite like that, but
Hmm. Stewards? No, actually, no. Video replay. Uh, what would you prefer? Formula One in the 21st century, the past 22 years, or Formula One from 1980 to 2000?
80 to 2000,
Yeah,
because I
definitely.
was there.
You were there. The racing was tighter. There was a lot more personalities as well, right? Don't you think?
Yeah,
And it was
yes.
proper racing. It was bumper to bumper, hardcore racing without any pussyfooting around, right? You either got in there, you went for the gap, and no matter what happened, everyone on the track knew it was racing, and if you didn't go hard, you could just go home.
Yeah, more or less.
You think you think the drivers today are a bit too soft? Or the sport in general is a bit too soft?
I don't think the drivers are that much different now. I don't think drivers change a great deal. They have to handle a lot more. I mean, when you look at the drivers now, they have to do so many things, and just think how many changes they've got to make on the steering wheel. You know, they're changing the damper settings, they're changing the angles of things. They're more like rocket pilots now, really. And what's surprising is that people would say, "Oh, you know, they made a mistake." It's how few mistakes they actually make. So I think from that point of view, but I mean, a racer's a racer, and I think you could take the top elements of Formula One and they could still be competitive. You know, it just depends how much they appreciate history. You know, I think Lewis, for one, probably Max, um, would still be as competitive or whatever. They'd have to change the mindset because you know you couldn't. You've got to have that little bit more respect because if you don't, you could hurt yourself. But I think the skills are transferable.
Well, you
But
made a good point there by saying, uh, yeah, everyone's focusing on the mistake that they make now, but you need to consider how few mistakes they actually make. And
absolutely,
maybe that's why the fans and the community erupt so severely, so harshly when one of these top drivers makes a mistake or there's some controversy because, well, it doesn't happen every race usually. But yeah, there's more credit or more attention to the mistakes rather than more credit for
but life
the
is like
the fewer mistakes that they actually make.
well that. But life is like that now. You know, society is very much blame. You don't get the blame. One of the things I always talk about is you don't blame the culprit. You know, if one makes a during a pit stop, something goes wrong with one of the wheels. You don't need to chastise the guy that did it. He's going to hurt more just because of what he's actually done. The no blame concept is a much more effective way to do it. You know, if you're blaming people, you're trying to assert control over them more than anything, and that's not what is good leadership skills. You want to take people with you and
And it
incentivize you.
yeah, yeah, it breeds aggression and both parties are going to lose out.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
A deal is a deal.
yeah, true, true. This is an interesting one. This is one I thought at the last minute, and might need some thinking, but maybe not. Which one out of these two, Bernie or Liberty Media, in terms of running the show?
Depends when. Uh, okay, I would say it's like, I mean, let's put it in business terms. Sales or project or management. Bernie was about selling, setting up the product. He made a fantastic product. The thing was that then he reached a certain stage, in his life, because he's 91 now, so something like that. Things had actually moved in, and life actually changes. So Liberty is management and showbiz, but it was Bernie who inspired the concept. I mean, where Formula One started, he was always the one that did the deals and had the vision for it. I don't think he
Well,
had
yeah,
a long term, but he was opportunist and he always made the most of it. So I don't. One was then and one is now. I wouldn't say, but Formula
yeah,
One wouldn't be where it was without Bernie.
true. I mean, and that's, I mean, we could talk another hour on another podcast purely about Bernie and what he's done for F1. Uh, yeah, he took it from the garageists, uh, basically an amateur sport, and built it into a multi-billion-dollar sport and empire. But I'm actually, well, not surprised, but I'm satisfied with how Liberty have been doing it, because in between, remember, well, in the late '90s when Bernie was selling it off and he sold it to the Germans, and then he sold it to, I think at the turn of the century, CPC, another company tried to run it. So in the past, well, from '96 to today, there's actually been another two owners of F1. And
Bernie's always been there.
yeah,
Bernie
they
was
failed
involved.
miserably. But I think, especially with the graphics and the viewer interaction that Liberty has introduced to Formula One, I mean, that's been fantastic. Some of these graphics and the information that they're now giving the viewers at home is mind blowing. How they do that.
But
I would
they
have
are
thought
very,
maybe it's a bigger show in terms of what they've done with the other sports. I think it was baseball and NFL that they've done things with, and they're a Warner Brothers company. But it's still the young days. I think it's only been 5 years, 5 or 6 years that they've had it. So I'm sure there's going to be bigger and better things to come from Liberty.
yeah, I agree. But Bernie was he's the deal maker. I suppose that's what it boils down to. He wheeler dealer. But you asked him what he was. He's a car dealer, first and
Yeah, a
foremost.
used car dealer.
Used car dealer, and it's just not to get more zeros. They always used to think of you think because Bernie made all the team principals and the people buying the teams all very very rich.
Hmm.
And so you could imagine Bernie was the chief. You think about it in the Indian tradition, he's the big chief, and then you've got lots of little chiefs who owe a lot to Bernie because it put them where they are. And he always used to play one off against the other, just to get his way. So what he didn't want was a united front, and that might not be the best thing. I mean, what's
Well,
what's going to be interesting is now, are they going to allow more teams to come in? And a lot of people saying, "Oh, we can't have more than 20." Well, you could actually go up to 24, but I can remember the days when we used to have pre-qualifying.
mm,
So first thing on a Friday morning, you get the cars in the Perry McCarthys of the world, whatever, doing that sort of thing. So uh,
that's right. Yeah, when there were 30, 35, 36 cars. But, yeah, they had to have the Thursday and Friday pre-qualifying sessions, and
Friday morning,
if they were out of the 107 or 105% time limit, they didn't get to race.
yeah, it was. I think it was in 8 till 9 in the morning, if I sort of remember correctly, on a Friday
Yeah,
morning.
Yeah, that's right. Pre-qualifying. True. Well, yeah, I think someone was in the media this week about being confident that there could be 24 because Michael Andretti is talking to the FIA about having a team.
He's
Have you seen
another
that?
McLaren ex McLaren driver for a while.
Yeah, how was he within the team? Because you were working with McLaren when Michael Andretti was there. That was what, 93, 92?
23. Well, he came across as a great overtaker. He was an IndyCar racer. The problem is he happened to be one of the most sophisticated racing cars, and he was racing against Ayrton Senna. So that sort of made it a little harder. Nice guy. He took it a bit of getting used to, but he was a nice guy. I did several promotions with him. He used to bring his wife to it was a bit of a distraction. With I remember she got a bit nervous and was standing on the pit wall, which she could do in those days, and I can remember feeling her nails going into my shoulders because she was getting agitated about it. And she didn't like the television in the hotel room, so she bought a TV, put it in the room.
She bought her own TV because she didn't like the TVs that the hotel supplied.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But
"I
Michael's
want
a
my
good,
own TV."
yeah. You know, but Michael was a good guy, as astute. I, he was very much the typically American showman. That didn't he didn't outwardly social. He was quite well, he was shy or whatever, except when he put a microphone in front, and then he changed. And I did my first ever proper driver interview was with Michael. Now, I used to introduce Ayrton, and then Ayrton displayed what it was like to go back around the circuit. But I had to interview Michael, and I worked it out, and that was I understood a bit about visualization. And you imagine saying it, he's smiling, his guests are smiling, and then applause and that sort of thing. And it went very well indeed. But it's like the switch is there, just as a professional thing. When he finishes, switch goes off, and he goes off to do another thing. But he's built a very successful company. It needs Formula One needs new blood. It needs a bit of a cull. Wondering what's going to happen to the Haas team, because
Mm,
they just signed
Magnussen.
Magnussen.
Yeah, Kevin
Um,
Magnussen.
he dealt with his father once, because his father was sponsored by one of the lower categories, but he liked his drink and he gets a bit too much. I think he's a
Yeah.
natural talent.
Yeah, I remember his dad, Jan Magnussen, was with, he was racing with, Rubens Barrichello, and they were the first 2 drivers for the Stewart team when Jackie Stewart launched his team
That's it.
in,
That's
95,
right.
96, 97, 96, 95, 96.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I remember someone telling me that, yeah, Jan wasn't the most organized, precise kind of person, and you could tell by the way he packed his luggage, something like that. It was all messy, and it's like,
He
and
was
and yeah,
quick.
like you said, he loved his cigarettes as well. So
Him and Knuckle for some reason, and he came to it just in his underwear, and you could smell the smoke coming out of the room.
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Haas. Maybe I don't know anything about Kevin bringing money in, but I do
I don't
know
think
that
he is.
Mazepin is wanting a refund because, well, his sponsors, Ukraine, are wanting a refund from Haas for terminating the contract before, or
Depends what
terminating it
contract.
early.
That's something they can sort out themselves.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. One last one here. Bring back pit stop refueling or not?
I would say not, because I think all it led was a certain type of driving, and it was more dominated by the race result was by the fuel. And to an extent, it's the same with the tyres at the moment here. They weren't, well, they were flat out. I mean, refueling worked with Michael because he was consistently very quick. I think that having been at the and it was Jos Verstappen, I seem to remember in the Benetton had the
Mm.
fire. The
Yeah, that was
speed that that fire,
94.
it's just a flash, but I mean it is highly dangerous stuff. Although they look as if they're going to change the fueling now to be more eco-based, I think. But
Right.
I think on reflection, I'd say not refuel.
We were in the Singapore Grand Prix Media Center when Massa, when he was in the Ferrari and drove off, and they didn't dislodge the fuel hose. Remember that? And he drove all the way down the pit lane, dragging the fuel hose behind him. He didn't
Fuel
know.
hose.
Yeah, it was Felipe Massa at the Singapore Grand Prix. He, yeah, he went off. He was released from the pits, but they hadn't taken the fuel hose out. That must have been around that. When was he? 2009, 10, 8, 9, 10, 11, around there.
Oh right.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Right. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, I'm sure there's going to be more podcasts with you because we do have a lot to talk about. Um, on both sides, and it would be great to have you back. And we need to fix your webcam as well. Uh, we've been talking for an hour and a half so far.
God, are we really?
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. But the next time we get together and have a chat, between now and then, that's when I want you to really dig deep inside the memory and come up with the juicy ones, the really, really juicy ones.
I have to speak to my lawyer about this. I've got one I'm working on is I've got to write amend my memoirs. So I've got my notes, some of my notes here. One day
True.
I'll try and get them.
Well, I keep telling you to just get a dictaphone or even use your phone and just record your voice and just talk into it, get whatever's in your head out, and then I or someone else can write it write it down.
Yes, it's an ongoing project. You're getting closer to it.
All
Just
right,
my
cool.
typing these days.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Peter. It's great to see you. And we'll have you on when I think the season starts very soon, the Formula One season. So it'll be good to catch up with you during the races, and maybe we can have a chat post race about bits and pieces during the race, and get your opinion on things.
Yeah, okay, happy to do that.
Great. Well, we'll leave it there for now, and
Okay,
we'll definitely catch up. So thanks a lot for your time. Stay in touch, and we will. Until then, let's rock and roll and enjoy the start of the 2022 Formula One season.